Imagine the roar of engines echoing across a French countryside night, headlights slicing through fog, drivers wrestling with fatigue and machines built to the absolute edge of their endurance. What unfolds isn't just a race, but a struggle against time, heat, and mechanical failure. On one side stand the seasoned champions, masters of precision with years of dominance behind them. On the other, a brash newcomer with little experience in this arena, but a burning drive to prove the impossible could be done. The stakes aren't trophies or headlines alone. It's national pride, corporate vengeance, and a battle of engineering philosophies, each lap a test that could make or break reputations built over decades. Imagine the suspense of watching an underdog machine thunder down the Mulsanne Straight, defying expectations with raw power and relentless stamina, while rivals wait for it to falter under the strain of 24 relentless hours. The story of how that machine not only survived but rewrote racing history is one that reshaped the way the world looked at endurance competition forever. If you're ready to dive into that saga, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment below what legendary machine you want to see covered next. The Ford GT40 1966 begins its story not on the racetrack, but in the boardrooms and workshops where frustration met ambition. Within the first 30 words of this account, the GT40 emerges as more than just a machine. It was conceived as a weapon of pride, retaliation, and endurance. What makes this model's origin compelling is not just the metallic structure or horsepower numbers, but the urgency behind its creation, the weight of corporate decisions, and the human spirit driving it forward. Its name now represents victory, but in the early days, doubt was far louder than confidence. How could a newcomer challenge veterans who had perfected their craft over decades? Microstory. The deal that never was. Before the GT40 ever touched the tarmac, there was a business deal that nearly altered the course of motorsport history. A major American automaker attempted to buy a small but dominant European racing brand, envisioning an alliance that could combine vast resources with unmatched expertise. Yet at the last moment, that plan collapsed, leaving egos bruised and rivalries inflamed. This corporate betrayal sparked a determination that money alone couldn't soothe. The result was the decision to build a car that would serve as a rolling declaration of defiance. Microstory, designing under pressure. With little time and even less racing pedigree, the team tasked with building the GT40 faced staggering odds. Engineers wrestled with unfamiliar designs, improvising solutions to problems they had never faced before. Every test revealed new weaknesses: overheating engines, fragile gearboxes, aerodynamics that turned the car into a near-airborne missile at high speeds. Yet through trial and error, with countless sleepless nights and broken parts, the machine slowly began to take shape. What kept the project alive wasn't perfection, but persistence. Context digest. Why endurance racing mattered. Unlike short sprints, endurance races tested not just raw speed, but durability, strategy, and driver stamina. Winning Le Mans meant proving a car could endure punishing conditions for 24 hours, something most manufacturers avoided. Success wasn't about minutes. It was about surviving the ticking clock and the unforgiving track. To triumph, there was to demonstrate absolute mastery of engineering and resilience. That's why the decision to enter this arena carried such monumental risk and potential reward. Microstory, the first failures. Early attempts with the GT40 were nothing short of humiliating. The car was fast in bursts but unreliable, breaking down before it could even threaten seasoned rivals. Each loss was public, each retirement a fresh headline reminding skeptics that American money couldn't buy European experience. Yet within those failures lay data, lessons, and a relentless determination to evolve. The GT40 wasn't written off as a one-shot attempt. It became an evolving project that adapted after every defeat. Reflection bridge. From ashes of embarrassment grew the foundation of resilience, proving that failure was not an end but a process toward eventual triumph. Context digest. The role of rivalry. Competition has always fueled progress, but in this case, rivalry became a full-blown obsession. The desire to defeat a specific opponent turned into a corporate mission statement, influencing not just engineering but marketing, identity, and legacy. Rivals became symbols of arrogance to be toppled, and every challenge only deepened the hunger to succeed. For the GT40, this rivalry was the heartbeat that kept the program alive, even when logic suggested quitting. Microstory, the people behind the machine. While the GT40's silhouette and statistics catch the eye, its story is really about the individuals who risked careers to make it real. Engineers who defied conventions, drivers who trusted an unproven car, and executives who staked reputations all collided in this project. These were not faceless figures, but personalities with tempers, visions, and sometimes clashing agendas. The GT40 became not only a car, but also a reflection of human stubbornness and brilliance in equal measure. Context Digest: the economics of racing. Building an endurance car wasn't just about pride. It was about budgets that ballooned, factories diverted, and resources stretched thin. Racing was expensive, and every component tested represented thousands of dollars spent with no guarantee of success. But for the automaker behind the GT40, the money was less a cost than an investment in reputation and revenge. This wasn't racing for sport alone. It was a calculated gamble for dominance and global perception. Reflection Bridge. By the time the GT40 returned to the track, it was no longer just a prototype. It was a message in motion, ready to silence its critics and challenge the crown. Microstory: first signs of potential. With each iteration, the GT40 grew closer to the machine it was meant to be. When it finally stayed on track long enough to show both speed and resilience, whispers of its potential turned into real concern for rivals. No longer dismissed as a curiosity, it began to look like a genuine threat. For the first time, its creators tasted the possibility of not just participation, but victory. That possibility carried them forward into the most crucial test of all. And so the journey from humiliation to possibility set the stage for the GT40's defining battles, where engineering, endurance, and raw determination would collide with destiny. The Ford GT40 1966 enters its second chapter as more than a struggling prototype. It now stood as a hardened contender shaped by failures and relentless refinement. Within the first 30 words of this segment, the GT40 asserts itself as a car transformed, carrying not just horsepower, but the weight of expectation. What unfolded was not a smooth climb to glory, but a grueling escalation in which every gain carried new risks, and every innovation had to withstand the brutality of 24 hours on track. The heart of this phase lies in how a concept became a weapon, tested not in theory but in the fire of competition. Microstory: the monster under the hood. Central to the GT40's rise was a massive V8 engine that looked less like precision craftsmanship and more like brute force forged into metal. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't delicate, it was a sledgehammer disguised as an engine, designed to outlast and overpower sleek but fragile rivals. The gamble was clear. Could something so heavy and forceful endure the non-stop punishment of endurance racing without tearing itself apart? Each test stretched the limits of physics and patience, and slowly the answer began to tilt in its favor. Context Digest: engineering as evolution. Every race was a laboratory, every lap a lesson. Where some teams refined stability and grace, the GT40 team doubled down on resilience and raw speed. They didn't seek to match existing formulas. They sought to rewrite them, crafting a new definition of what endurance performance meant. Failures became stepping stones, and each painful breakdown added knowledge that shaped the car into a fearsome competitor. Microstory: the crucible of testing. Away from the spotlight of Europe's grand tracks, brutal testing sessions became the proving ground. Engines overheated until cooling systems were redesigned, brakes faded until new materials were sourced, and drivers fought exhaustion just as much as machinery fought physics. The GT40 wasn't handed reliability. It clawed for it through sweat, metal, and endless adjustments. These trials became the silent victories that laid the foundation for visible triumphs to come. Reflection Bridge. What began as a corporate act of revenge was now morphing into a cultural story of sheer endurance, where the car itself symbolized grit and transformation. Microstory: the turning point races. When the GT40 finally began to finish races with consistency, the world took notice. Suddenly, this once mocked machine wasn't just surviving, it was competing, and sometimes even dominating stretches of the race. Rivals grew nervous, commentators whispered about an upset in the making, and fans started to see the car as a genuine force. These moments weren't yet ultimate victory, but they were sparks that lit the fire of belief. Context Digest: the stakes beyond the track. This battle wasn't only mechanical. It was corporate and cultural. For the creators of the GT40, victory would mean redemption in boardrooms, headlines across continents, and a redefined global reputation. Racing was never just about crossing the finish line. It was about proving who could command the world stage through innovation and resilience. That's why every small win mattered, because each one carried the weight of international pride. Microstory: drivers in danger. The GT40 may have been engineered for glory, but it was the drivers who risked everything behind the wheel. They wrestled with unpredictable handling, trusted machines known to fail spectacularly, and put their lives on the line for every lap. For them, the GT40 was not just an assignment. It was a test of nerve and endurance that would etch their names in history if they could hold on until the end. Their bravery added a human dimension to the machine's evolving legend: Reflection Bridge. By the time the GT40 roared onto the starting line at Le Mans, it wasn't just a car anymore. It was destiny embodied in steel and gasoline. Context digest. The psychological war. Rivals who once mocked the GT40 now eyed it with suspicion. Rumors spread through pits about its relentless torque, its surprising durability, and the resources poured into its development. This was no longer an underdog curiosity, but a looming shadow across the grid. The psychological edge shifted. Doubts began to creep not into the minds of the GT40's team, but into those of its competitors. Microstory: the defining showdown approaches. With the stage set, all roads pointed to the most famous endurance race of them all. For the GT40, this wasn't just another competition. It was the ultimate proving ground, the moment when years of labor, failure, and innovation would either collapse or coalesce. Fans, journalists, and rival teams waited in suspense, knowing this was a story that could redefine an era. The car stood ready, and so did the stakes. And with the eyes of the racing world fixed firmly on one track, the GT40 prepared to meet its destiny, setting up the moment where its legacy would be forged forever. The Ford GT40, 1966, enters its third and most decisive chapter as the moment of truth arrives: the legendary 24 Hours of Le Mans. Within the first 30 words of this segment, the GT40 steps onto the world's grandest endurance stage. No longer an experiment, but a contender tasked with rewriting racing history. The atmosphere was electric, tension so thick it clung to the damp night air as rivals prepared for dominance and skeptics waited for the newcomer to fail. What followed was not a clean march to victory, but a brutal, hour-by-hour struggle against physics, fatigue, and fate. Microstory: the battle begins. At the drop of the flag, the GT40 unleashed its thunder, surging with raw power that startled seasoned observers. Its massive V8 bellowed down the straights, tearing through the night with unrelenting force. But speed alone wasn't enough. Every corner demanded precision. Every lap pushed drivers closer to exhaustion. Rivals hoped the car's brute strength would implode before morning, yet hour after hour, the machine held on. Context digest. The true test of endurance. Le Mans wasn't just a race. It was mechanical survival stretched across a day and night. Cars that sprinted early often fell by the wayside, consumed by engine failure, brake collapse, or simple attrition. To win meant balancing aggression with strategy, protecting machinery while still pressing the attack. The GT40's creators had built their car with this philosophy in mind. Knowing victory required discipline as much as horsepower. Microstory: the midnight grind. As the clock struck into darkness, headlights pierced the misty air while engines screamed relentlessly. Drivers rotated through brutal stints, fighting exhaustion with grit, relying on the GT40 to endure. The car, once plagued with fragility, showed new resilience. Systems held, parts endured, and its stamina grew more shocking with each passing lap. Where others faltered, the GT40 seemed reborn under the strain, transforming doubt into awe. Reflection Bridge. What had once been dismissed as a blunt instrument was now proving itself a finely tuned weapon of endurance, commanding respect with every relentless lap. Microstory: the turning of the tide. By dawn, the GT40 was no longer a question mark but a frontrunner, hammering down straights with unrelenting pace. Rivals dropped away, either crippled by failure or exhausted by the pursuit. The sight of this once ridiculed machine dominating the leaderboard sent shockwaves through pits and grandstands alike. Victory, once unthinkable, now loomed within reach. Context digest. the symbolism of victory. Beyond the race itself, the stakes meant cultural redemption. For the company behind the GT40, this was more than trophies. It was about pride, proving that engineering muscle and determination could topple established legends. In garages and offices continents away, reputations and futures rested on every lap. The finish line would decide not only the race, but the narrative of who commanded the pinnacle of endurance racing. Micro story, the checkered flag. When the sun rose and the final hours dwindled, the GT40 held its ground, defying every expectation that it would break. And when the checkered flag fell, it wasn't just a victory. It was domination, with a sweep of the podium that silenced critics and cemented its place in history. The machine that began as an act of vengeance had become a legend through sheer perseverance. Reflection bridge. From failure to triumph, the GT40's journey embodied how obsession, innovation, and unyielding willpower could reshape motorsport forever. Context Digest. The aftermath on racing culture. The win didn't just belong to the GT40 team. It shifted how endurance racing was approached globally. Suddenly, brute force and durability became as celebrated as elegance and precision. The GT40 had redrawn the blueprint, showing that survival and supremacy could coexist in a single machine. That revelation rippled through factories, rival programs, and fans worldwide, forever changing how victory was defined. Micro story. The legacy begins. What made the GT40's triumph enduring was not just its moment at Le Mans, but the ripple effect it unleashed. Its victory was replayed in boardrooms, headlines, and garages for years, a constant reminder that the unthinkable could be achieved with enough determination. It became more than a car. It became a cultural icon, a monument to endurance and defiance. And with its story etched into history, the GT40's triumph stood as proof that sometimes the greatest legends are born not from smooth beginnings, but from relentless struggles that end in unforgettable glory. The Ford GT40 1966 closes its tale not simply as a race car, but as a cultural icon forged from rivalry, ambition, and triumph. Within the first 30 words of this summary, the GT40 reminds us that its story began in failure and ended in dominance. A journey that continues to resonate across generations of enthusiasts. For US viewers, its legacy offers more than nostalgia. It provides a blueprint for how persistence and bold engineering can overturn expectations. Owning or even aspiring toward a GT40 today means connecting with a piece of history that redefined endurance racing and reshaped global perception of what American innovation could achieve. The car was never practical in the everyday sense, its roar deafening, its comfort non-existent. But ownership was never about convenience. It was about pride, about possessing a machine that stood as a rolling monument to victory against the odds. For modern collectors, the GT40 is less about transportation and more about preservation, an artifact valued not for utility, but for the story it carries. And that story resonates with a distinctly American ideal. When doors close, when deals fail, and when rivals doubt you, there remains a path through determination and unrelenting willpower. Its triumph wasn't just on a racetrack in France. It was in proving that persistence and vision could turn a national humiliation into one of the most celebrated victories in motorsport history. The GT40 is a reminder that legends are not handed down. They are built lap by lap against the resistance of doubt and adversity. For those who study its story, admire its form, or dream of its growl echoing down an open road, the GT40 remains a symbol of what it means to rise after failure and to dominate when no one believed you could. And that's why, decades after its victories, the machine still commands awe, still inspires passion, and still whispers the truth that perseverance is the ultimate engine of history.